Welcome to the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast. I am your host, Ann Alston, and it is once again my pleasure to bring quality programs to all of you. I am excited yet again to be back with another amazing speaker, professional. Just love to have these folks on this platform because in 2018, this is definitely the platform to be on. Just in case you didn't know, the purpose of the BMWOC is to not only share our industry information, but we are encouraging you, the working professional, college students, anyone who is looking to get into this line of work. We have people on here that is sharing such amazing information. So be sure to visit all of the pages and take a moment to listen to all of the podcasts that we're going to have posted this year. There's a lot of good information. Make sure you take some notes. Also, reach out to them and build your connection, build your network, because that's what it's all about. I would also like to take a moment to thank our corporate sponsors, Kat Serrano, LLC, Cheryl Wood Empowers, Concern and Learning, Evangelism Radio, Genesis Preferred Solutions, J Coach International, Nels Tax Help, My Financial Home, Power, STCI, and the Student Teacher, along with our other business affiliate sponsors and participants that is helping to make this event a success. So today we have a young lady here who I am so excited to talk to today. Her name is Christine Lindor, and she is a management consultant, author, podcast host, and speaker. And she focuses on all things that is transformational. She specializes in partnering with both private and public sector clients to harness the power of their authenticity in organizational change. She has spent her entire 16 years of career working for some of the most top consulting firms in the world. Given her vast experience in consulting, Christine enjoys being a frequent soundboard to dozens of mentees and has proteges that are doing great things around the world. So, welcome to the podcast, Christine.
Thank you so much, Anne. Glad to be here for sure.
Awesome. So, tell us more about you and what you do and your passion.
Yeah. Well, you did such a nice job there. I was like, well, maybe, you can continue on with the interview. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you
but
so
yeah, well, I really appreciate it. And, hey, listeners. So, as Anne mentioned, my name is Christie Lindor. I am a seasoned management consultant, and I've been in this space for over 16 years. And a lot of my expertise really evolves around large scale, complex, transformational programs of both an IT function as well as an HR function. So I've been, worked and had a lot of different experience across a number of different industries, and traveled all over the world, quite frankly, for the line of work that I do. So I'm super thrilled to be here today. In addition to being a consultant, I have actually recently published my first book. It's called The MECE Muse, and I have a podcast show. Yeah, I'm
nice.
excited. Um, my book actually the paper book officially ships next Tuesday, so
Nice.
February 20th. So I'm very excited.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us about how did you even get into this industry? What were you doing? What were you thinking when you first came out of high school and said, I think I want to go to college or do a certain skill? What made you go into this field?
Yeah, it's a question I get quite often. And what's interesting about that, I actually had never heard of consultants or management consultants coming up. So you have to keep in mind that I am first generation American. So I have, come from an immigrant background, and I'm also first generation, college grad, first generation corporate professional. So most of the careers that I thought about growing up was what I saw in my environment. I saw, hairstylists, which I had a lot of affinity to because I really was into hair at that time. I saw, different types of vocational trades. I know my parents were pushing me into either, becoming a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor. That was like, kind of the professions. I had never really heard of consulting. And I actually stumbled on consultants in my junior year of college. I was on an internship, my first corporate internship, and I walked into a room of consultants. And they were in the process of helping the company that I was working for through a strategy project. And there was just something about them, and that really intrigued me. So I walked in, and they were like huddled around a board, and they were trying to solve a problem. And I just kind of watched them from afar, and I love the interaction they had with each other. They were really passionate about really helping clients solve their problem. And I also found it fascinating that, there's maybe about 6 or 7 of them in the room. None of them lived in my city. They all traveled in every week for this project. And so I remember when I met them and I started to hear more about them, I stalked them that entire summer and just asking them, like, what is a consultant? What does that mean? What do you do? And I walked away that summer. I was actually thought I was going to do marketing work, but I walked away that summer saying, yep, I'm going to become a consultant because I want to be able to help solve big, complex business problems. I want to work with really smart people, and I want to travel the world, and I want to be able to do that and not have kind of your typical 9 to 5. So here I am 16 years later, and I'm still enjoying the ride.
Wow, that is fantastic. You know what? You said a really key thing. You have to stalk people to get information. And not just stalk people, but you also have to stalk the library. You're going to have to like do everything you can to find out about the industry that you're really interested in. And that's what we have to do more of. Is just really taking the time to just dig deep, and it just sounds like you just dig deep to find out everything you need to know about consulting, and you just went there. So that was really, really great. So let's talk about some of the great things about being a consultant, because, and the reason why I really want to focus on that on this point, because there are so many people who want to be consultants or
Mm-hmm.
coaches or some kind of advisory of some sort. But because we're talking about management consulting in particular, just kind of give, some of the things that you have experienced on the best practices, what to avoid, and things like that. And what is really the best way to even break into consulting?
Yeah, it's another very commonly asked questions because a lot of the when I consider kind of some of the top consulting firms, there isn't really a clear path of entry into them. At least when I was coming up 15 years ago, my school, for example, the undergrad graduate college that I went to was not on what they call a target list. So, the firms that I currently work at today, they go to, very prestigious Ivy League schools, and that's where they look for their talent, right? So they always look for kind of the cream of the crop from academia, or they hire people that are experienced. And so it could be a little elusive at times in terms of figuring out the path forward. For me, like I said, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I actually started out with tech consulting because at the time, it was the .com era. And so it was all about IT. It was all about technology and websites. Internet was just coming up. So it felt like it was a right place to land. And I did that. And after about 5 years, I said, well, this is great, but I really want to go back to the passion that I saw in that conference room back in my junior year. And I really want to do more high level strategy work. And so for me, it was just a matter of, it was kind of a combination of, I had experience in the tech consulting space. I had already started to build connections with individuals with, in terms of my relationships and my network. And I did have a desire. I did to make my transition, and I actually did a lot of pro bono volunteer work. Helping nonprofits. This is like doing this nights and weekends, but helping them solve their business problems and to be able to get that experience. So it wasn't it wasn't a shoe in for me. I had to really forge and create that path. So anyone that's looking to do that, I always say people, you can make the leap if that's the type of work you want to do. Understand that it's not as straightforward. Like, let's say, for example, if you go to like a Harvard or you go to a Stanford, it's a lot easier because firms are at those schools. But if they're not, we're so connected, and with the internet and everything. I think it's just a matter of having the right experiences, gaining experiences, and really building connections. Those are really the two key things you need to land a consulting job, nowadays.
Yeah. And that is so true though, Chrissy, because even when I did my Facebook Live, that's one of the things we talked about is how you really have to build a relationship with a client and serve and not sell. all the time. A lot of times you just have to kind of know what it is that they need and solve their problem, and then you build trust, and then you can build up your reputation by doing that. And that's just really, really key. I think a lot of people just say, "Oh, I just want to go in there and just help people solve their problem," but not really knowing what to do. And I think it's really great for people who are listening to this podcast, if they're thinking about going into consulting or any kind of, advisory type of position, to kind of like tap to you, ask your advice, or anybody else that's on this podcast, the best ways to kind of break into consulting, because it's different for,
Yeah,
for, especially if depending on the target, and you have, high leadership clients, right? So
right,
there's
right.
different lot of clients out there. So if you're not catering to that client, you're not going to do good, right?
Yeah, what's interesting about that, Anne? I think sometimes when I speak to different individuals, they have kind of the dream version of what they think consulting is. And so consulting can be a lot of different things. People don't have to necessarily consult to the CEO of a Fortune 100 company to be a great consultant. That's not the case. You don't have to necessarily do strategy work to be a great consultant. There's all types of different types of consulting. There's internal, people can go off and be an independent. And so I always say start with what is around you immediately. Yes, you may have a certain type of work you want to be exposed to, and relationships you want to build. I think that's fabulous, but start with where you are now and really do a really knockout job with the work you do now, and look for opportunities where you can build in consultative skills. And you can do that in any sector, any profession, any industry. I think it's just really having the mindset that, this is what I'd like to do. And over time, I believe you'll over time attract the right people, attract the right opportunities, and it really kind of attract the right resources to get you to where you want to go. But I always say don't devalue where you are now, because I really believe that people are where they're supposed to be in life. And sometimes when we look at where we are, we don't accept it because it doesn't match what we think we should be. And I think you kind of rob yourself. So you make sure, really take care of where you are, ground zero, do that extremely well, and then you build from there.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so just for clarification for those who are college students, do you necessarily have to have a business administration degree in order to really be considered a consulting if you're going into that field? I get that question sometimes about what degree programs is best fit for somebody who wants to be a management consultant or any kind of consultant. And people often gravitate to the business administration degree. And so, from your
Yeah.
perspective, is that something that they absolutely must have, or is that just fluff out there that people are just saying?
Yeah, that's a myth. That's definitely a common myth. So the clear answer is no. You do not have to have a business degree to be a great consultant. I have some of my colleagues that I work with, and one gentleman, he's actually a former musician. So he's got a degree from, like, in professional music from Berkeley, right? I have another individual. He's actually and he has an engineer background. I have another young lady. She actually majored in like linguistics and art. So it's not about the degree. Well, yes, people that have business degrees are they are taught certain core principles that you use in consulting on a day-to-day basis. But that you can pick up anywhere. I think honestly the best consultants come at things because they have a really distinct diversity of thought. They have diversity of experiences, and they bring those. So sometimes our best consultants are people from the military, or people that used to be in music, because they will see a complex business problem very differently. So I welcome, and I know at the place that I work and other people, you're always looking for people with various backgrounds. So again, it goes back to two things. Doesn't matter what everybody else says. Two things to become a great consultant: you need
Okay.
experience, and you
Experience.
need those relationships.
That's right. I
That's
would have
it.
to add knowledge too, because you can't be a consultant unless you actually know what you're saying, and you really like did it. I think that for me that will be my third caveat, because a lot of these organizations, you don't have to be like the most experienced person, but you still have to have some understanding about how to resolve an issue, and that to me is
Right.
knowledge. So, like to ask. Okay, so I wanted to move the next segment into what you actually provide in your specific business, services that you do, and why you do what you do.
Yeah. So, today what I do is primarily really leading large programs and really helping really companies transform. So, if a company comes to me and they decide, hey, we want to do this merger, we want to do an acquisition, what is my new organization going to look like? What type of culture do we want to create? And how do I get there? How do I create the path or the roadmap to get there? And so, what I typically do with organizations is really help them understand and really hone in on where they are currently in their environment. So, in other words, what is their current culture? What is the roles and responsibilities that are, kind of in place? How is this organization structured? And then really understanding what are their strategic goals for the future. How do we come up with kind of, the new blueprint of what that looks like, but also how do we create an action plan to get there? And my projects range across the board with that same theme. So, I can help an organization really think about like how do they do their performance management program differently? How do they reward and recognize people differently? Maybe how do they recruit differently? How do they really take, an IT, they may have an IT program or IT type of transformation, and how do they bring people along that just do not want to change? So I really help organizations and leaders kind of think through those pieces, but also put in a plan to make that happen. And in some cases, my clients ask me to actually execute the plan. So for example, one of my programs that I own right now, that's actually the case. I'm helping with a very large performance management transformation. I helped in terms of planning it out and mapping it, and right now we're going through the execution phase through the end of the year. So it just depends. Yeah, and there's always some sort of remix to that, but I would say that's the underlying theme is really to help companies go from one way of being to another way of being, and bringing their people along would be kind of the easiest way to describe the work I do.
Nice. That is fantastic. Do you offer any other services for the smaller businesses, or maybe people who are starting out for the first time that just have a really low budget? Because there's a lot of people who are doing either that, or either they're doing their side grind, they're working full time, but still have a business that they're trying to get up and might need some direction.
Yeah, I do get that. People ask if I do coaching and that sort. I'm not there yet. It's not something that I would say I'm completely closed off in doing, but I know my primarily expertise has been in more global, large enterprise organizations, with, at least 10,000 or more employees, with over $1 billion in revenue. That's kind of the sweet spot that I play in. I think a lot of what I do could apply definitely to some of the mid-size or the smaller or sometimes boutique firms. It just obviously there's different nuances with those environments, right? So if I start to look at like a mid-size firm, or I look at a smaller boutique, or even like a two-man shop, their challenges are very different. And so I know right now, like I said, I don't do that type of work, but I understand those challenges as well. Just kind of given the nature of the type of work that I've done in the past.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about this book that you've written. Okay, let's talk about
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I'm interested to know more about the concept, and, how did you come to write the book, and maybe
sure.
give a little bit about, a little something something.
Yeah. So, the book organically happened. I actually spoke that book into existence 16 years ago. I really believe in the power of the tongue, because I remember I
Yeah.
said, I was like, I'm gonna write a book because this stuff is crazy. I
Let's
remember
give
the
the name
moment
of
I
the
said that.
yeah. Let's give the name of the book again so that everybody who's popping in, let's give the name of the book again.
Yeah, so the book is called the MECE Muse: 100 plus selected practices, unwritten rules, and habits of great consultants. So that's
Mm.
the full name of the book. And MECE, which a lot of people that is not in consulting ask me, what does that mean? MECE is an acronym. So MECE stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And as a management consultant, that's like your way of being. It's ingrained in you for you to look at every business problem from a MECE lens. And so it's just a way that we structure and as a guiding principle. I think what's been fascinating about this book is that a lot of people don't know that word, and it's such a common language in the world that I live in. So that's been a really interesting dynamic. But in terms of why did I write it, going back to me being kind of first generation, college grad, first generation American, when I started my career, and as excited as I was when I saw that group of people in the team room, you know, when I started my career, the first 5 years of my career, I was lost. I was really lost. Consulting itself, especially, when you start to do kind of tech consulting, management consulting, it's based on an apprenticeship model. So the whole premise of the way we operate is based on having a lot of junior consultants, at least in the larger firms, we operate that way. But it's usually you'll have a lot of junior consultants on a project, and then as there may be like a couple of managers and maybe like one senior executive. That's the typical project kind of model, of a project, for a case or an engagement that we're doing. And in order for you to survive in an apprenticeship model, guess what? You have to be someone's apprentice. So when I first started in my career, when I walked into rooms, when I walked into different projects, teams, cultures, I was always the only woman, and I was always the only person of color that I saw. And in my mind at that time, being so young and new to the business world, I thought I had to find an older version of myself. So I remember I spent years and looking for a woman leader in consulting, looking for a person of color. And I never really found those individuals. And then, when I was working so hard, traveling all over the place, and you just don't have mentorship, it is extremely hard. And I feel like sometimes it's designed that way to weed people out. So as hard as it was for me to get into consulting, to stay is a different story. Management consultants firms have a high turnover because people will make it in, but they may not last more than 2 years because it's designed to really weed people out or just have people that, have that mentorship to be able to make it. And I said, you know what? I don't have mentors, but you know what? I'm going to make this. This is what I want to do. I'm going to make this work. And then the day that I figure all this stuff out, I'm telling everybody how to be a great consultant. And that's exactly what this book is about.
Wow, you know what? I feel like, and I know this is going to be kind of weird, but I feel like that I'm your older version of you because here's the thing. Okay, so my core background is in information technology. And just like you,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for that mentor. I was either the only female or the only African American or the only African American woman in IT. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
in all the jobs that I worked, there was nobody mentoring me and all that. And just like you said, once you kind of figure it all out, it's a different ball of wax when you have to try to stay in the arena. And
Right.
it is designed to weed a lot of people out because there's a lot of, stigma, a lot of animosity, a lot of racism, a lot of everything, right? And so just trying to stay in the realm of IT, being a female and a black female, it was very difficult for me to be able to stay in that arena. So I kind of learned how to do career transition. And so like
Mm.
you, I want to tell everybody how you could do that because I don't want people to feel stuck. I don't want them to feel like that there is nobody that they can turn to ask a question
Right.
or, and that's why this podcast exists because even when I went to college, there weren't anyone coming back for, a career day for college students. You get that when you were,
Right.
you're young, maybe like a few times out of your whole 12 years of school. But when you go to college and you're paying all this money and stuff, you really want somebody who's actually living it and doing it to come back and say, this is what it's really like to be A, B, C, X, Y, Z. You don't get that. And so just like you, I want to tell everybody, how do you do what I did to overcome because I don't want people to feel stuck. And I'm glad that you wrote the book. I'm interested now. I'm gonna have to get the book.
Yeah,
Trying to
yeah,
get the
and
book
it's
to school.
efforts like yours and mine's,
Hmm.
and just like you have your podcast and I have my book and everything. It's those types of things, honestly, that's going to make really going to really change the world. I personally believe, because we're really helping trailblaze and really helping kind of create that roadmap that we didn't have. I mean, I think that it's just it's sad, but it's also inspirational at the same time.
Yeah, it's
Um,
sad. Yeah, sad. But you also have a podcast. Are you doing sort of the similar type of concept with your podcast as well?
Yeah, yeah. So the podcast is called the MECE Muse Unplugged, and it's literally my book in living color. So every week I interview different individuals, and we talk about things that are important for the new or the aspiring consultant. So it's really for early career consultants, and it's all about my mission to be the mentor that I wish I had. That's really what kind of the podcast is about.
Wow, fabulous, fabulous. So, are you engaged in any events that you're doing coming up that people would like to network with you on, or maybe you're speaking somewhere that maybe people can come and see you speak?
Yeah, I've got a lot of different things cooking, and as you can imagine, with the new book, for sure.
Okay.
I actually have an event. I know. By the time this podcast airs, it may have already passed. But what people can do if they're interested in any type of event that I do, I really post it on my book website. So it's called you go to www.muse.us, and that's MECE Muse MUSE us, and you can go there. I kind of keep kind of a running list of the different events where I'm either speaking, I'm moderating a panel, or I'm kind of keynoting. So I'd say check that out. That's the best way to kind of keep connected. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also post what I'm doing there as well.
All right, fabulous. Now, for the last question, well, next to the last question, do you have any kind of tips or advice for those who are in college or maybe younger people who are just coming out of high school about why you do what you do and why it would be a good thing for them to even consider doing either a
Yeah.
podcast or consulting or IT or any of the stuff that you did in your career?
It's a great question, and I think the first thing that if you're in college and you're listening to this, I think the first thing is to really figure out your why. Figure out what is it that that you're passionate about. What is it that you think you want to do? Because I think sometimes in college, some people like me, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but then others not so much. They're open to a lot of things, and they feel like their talents can be applied in a lot of different spaces. So I think it's figuring out your why. What wakes you up in the morning? What gets you excited? And don't put a title to it. I think just kind of think about what are the things you like to do and write those down, whatever those are. And I think as you start to write those down, take a step back and look at what are the themes that are jumping out. Is there a creative theme jumping out? Do you like to do things that are more analytical? Are you maybe like me, maybe super nerdy and geeky and you want to help solve business problems? Take a step back, like what are some of the things, that you would like to do in the future? And don't put titles, don't put a date, don't put anything to it, but just kind of think about what that looks like visually, and hold on to that. And I say as a college student, don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to do things that may have never been done before. And follow your dream. I would say that's the biggest thing. If they're interested in consulting specifically, I always say make sure you really understand the lifestyle of consult, because consulting is very different in terms of the lifestyle and the roles of consultants. You can do that through different types of internships, even informational interviews. So now, with the internet, it's fantastic. You can go on LinkedIn, type in management consultant, and see, where you may be connected to somebody that is in that space. Reach out to them, have an informational interview, ask them what they do. I mean, that's kind of what I did during my junior year. I didn't have the internet, and LinkedIn wasn't around back then, but I went up to them and said, "Hey, can we grab coffee? I want to hear what you do and why do you like it and what's challenging and what works for you." And I did that all summer to make my decision. So, now you can do that without even like you can do that with someone across the world, and not have to leave your bedroom to do so. So I say, take advantage of the opportunities around you, and don't be afraid to build your network. Even if you're doing work, let's say you are working at a retail shop, for example, and I just kind of made that example up. If you're working at a retail shop, don't devalue the people that are around you, because you never know where they're going to be the next time you meet them. Make sure you treat every type of interaction you have with people equally, and making sure that you're really open to staying connected and really building your brand, because you'd be surprised how sometimes people come back in your life in a different lens. The world is smaller than we think. So those would be my top ones for you, Anne.
Yeah, well, wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I totally 100% agree, especially with the last two tips that you did, because you never know who is going to come back. People are always watching, they're always letting you know. And I know I have some people that tell me all the time, they may not like say anything on my posts or anything, but they
Mm-hmm.
tell me all the time, I see all your posts and I'm following you every day and I'm really inspired. You just never know when people are going to come back and be your biggest advocates. So, building those connections and making sure that you are building the right connections with the right people is really important. So, let everybody know where they can find you, your website, your contact information if they want to reach out to you. And everybody, you heard it from her. Hey, she has actually stalked people all summer in college to figure out about consulting. So if you are really serious about that, reach out to Christy down here below on this page, and she's going to give you some more contact information right now.
Yeah. So people can check me out. I always say LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me. I'm always open to connecting with people. So please send me a LinkedIn invitation. I blog a lot. I do a lot of writing. I really enjoy writing. So if you're into reading blog posts, you can check out my blog. You go to christielindor.com. So that's ChristieLindor. My podcast is mecemuse.com, MECE muse.com. And my book is out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, so you can check it out. I mean, if you Google my name, I think I come up really, really fast. So I'm not hiding anymore. I used to be hiding. I'm an introvert, and in the last 2 years, I am no longer an introvert. I think people have stripped that title away from me. So happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for being on this podcast today. I want to show my appreciation for you and everybody else who have stepped up to be part of the movement to support small businesses and authors. So I really appreciate you, Christy, for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you, Anne.
Awesome. So again, everybody, I want to remind you that we have over 75, I think we have about 75 participants on this podcast. So please take a moment to check them all out, listen to the podcast, and feel free to connect with anyone on this platform, because the BMWOC is a community of strength, and so we're here to serve you.